The Alpha King rejected every woman, until a poor Omega dared to defy. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Emily Walker stood at the edge of the gathering, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched yet another woman being chosen. Her eyes followed the movements of the powerful alphas as they surveyed the room, each one stepping forward, their eyes scanning the women presented. One by one, they chose, their selections quick and without hesitation. The women they chose were graceful, powerful, and beautiful, all with the scent of an Omega ready to claim. But not Emily. She stood at the back, feeling smaller and smaller as the minutes passed. Her scent never developed like the other Omega women, and that was why she was constantly overlooked, rejected, and ignored. In a world ruled by alpha blood and strength, she was a shadow, a reminder of failure. She wasn't wanted. She wasn't enough. Her heart sunk deeper with each passing rejection. All her life, she had been told she wasn't enough. Her family had abandoned her, the pack had rejected her, and now even the Alpha King, the most powerful man in the kingdom, would never look her way. But as the ceremony came to an end, Emily felt something shift in the air. The last Alpha, the one everyone had been waiting for, stood at the front. Zane Blackwood, the Alpha King, tall and imposing, his eyes cold and calculating, scanned the room. His gaze fell upon Emily for a fleeting moment, but it was a moment that made her heart race. She knew the look he gave her. It wasn't one of recognition, it wasn't one of desire, it was one of indifference. The ceremony ended, and Emily, still unnoticed, was dismissed. She stood there in silence as the crowd began to disperse, her heart sinking with every step. She was used to being invisible, but today it stung more than ever. She began to walk away when, unexpectedly, a voice stopped her in her tracks. "You," the voice said, and she turned, startled. Standing before her was the Alpha King himself, his presence commanding. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice low and full of authority. Emily stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what was happening. The Alpha King, the man who had rejected every woman, was now speaking to her? This couldn't be real. But before she could react, he stepped closer. "You're not like the others," he said, his gaze sharp as it locked onto hers. "You dared to stand there and not beg for my attention. I admire that." Emily blinked, confused. He admired her? She had been invisible to him just moments ago. "You're nothing like the women I've rejected," he continued, his tone softening just slightly. "You're different." "Different," Emily repeated, her voice shaking slightly. "What do you mean?" Zane took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "I've rejected every woman who came before me," he said. "But you dared to defy the norm. You dared to be yourself, even when the world expects you to be someone else." Emily's heart raced, but this was no time for hope. She had been down this road before. She knew better than to trust words, especially from someone like him. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "I'm nothing. I'm just an Omega." Zane's expression softened, and for a moment, Emily saw something different in his eyes. Not indifference, but something more. "You may think you're nothing, but you're more than that," he said, his voice steady. "I don't need you to be like the others. I need someone who is strong enough to stand alone. And you've just proven that you are." Emily's breath caught in her throat as she tried to process his words. What was happening? Was this real? The Alpha King, the man who had rejected every woman, was now looking at her as if she were the one he had been waiting for. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to think. But in that moment, something shifted inside her. Maybe she wasn't nothing. Maybe, just maybe, she could be something more. Zane Blackwood, the Alpha King, was offering her something she had never dared to hope for. Not just his attention, but something much more. The question was, would she accept it? Zane Blackwood's gaze pierced through Emily, his silver eyes unblinking, steady with an intensity that made her heart beat faster than it ever had before. For the first time in her life, she felt as if someone truly saw her. The overwhelming sensation of being noticed, not for her appearance or her lack of scent, but for who she was at her core, hit her like a wave. She wanted to speak, to argue, but the words felt stuck in her throat. All she could do was stand there, trapped in the depths of his gaze. Zayn took another step toward her, closing the gap between them, his presence commanding yet strangely reassuring. He was the Alpha King, the ruler of all wolves, yet in this moment, it felt as though they were the only two people in the world. You stand out because you refuse to conform to the expectations placed on you, Zayn said, his voice quiet but firm. You don't beg for attention. You don't try to be someone else. That's something I admire. Emily felt the weight of his words settle heavily in her chest. She had never thought of herself as someone worthy of admiration. To her, she was just a broken omega, a woman who was always overshadowed by the strength and beauty of others. But Zayn's words made her question everything she had ever believed about herself. I never asked for any of this, Emily whispered, more to herself than to him. I never asked to be invisible. Zayn's expression softened, and for the first time, there was a glimpse of warmth in his gaze. You're not invisible, he replied gently. I see you, Emily. I've seen the way you stand your ground, even when the world tries to knock you down. That's strength. Emily's breath hitched, and she looked up at him, searching for any sign of insincerity. But all she found was honesty. I don't know what you're offering me, she said, her voice shaky. But I don't believe I'm the right person for you. Zayn tilted his head slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. And yet, here you are, standing before me, as if you've already made your decision. Emily's mind raced. This was absurd. She was just a simple omega, one who couldn't even attract the attention of the other alphas. Yet the Alpha King, the most powerful man in the kingdom, was now standing in front of her, telling her that he admired her. Why me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you choose someone like me? Zayn took a deep breath, his gaze never faltering. Because you are not like the others, he said, his voice low and steady. You may think you're weak, but you have something the others don't. Resilience. And that is what makes you stand out. The words hit her harder than she expected. Resilience. She had never thought of herself as resilient. She had always believed that her flaws were all anyone could see, that she was nothing more than a shadow in a world full of light. But here, with Zayn's eyes locked on hers, something inside her stirred. For the first time, she felt as though she had value, something that went beyond her scent, beyond her appearance. It was a feeling she didn't know how to handle, one that made her both terrified and hopeful. Zayn reached out and gently cupped her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his. You're not nothing, Emily, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You are everything I never thought I needed. But now that I've found you, I can't imagine my life without you in it. The weight of his words was almost too much to bear. Emily's chest tightened, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if she was breathing. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say yes, Zayn said simply. Say yes, and let's change our fates together. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. The words felt like a promise, a future, a possibility. She could feel her mind swirling with doubts, but deep down, she knew this moment would define the rest of her life. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? Slowly, she nodded, her voice steady as she spoke for the first time since they began. Yes. Zayn's eyes softened, and he smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and warmed her heart. In that moment, Emily knew that her life was about to change forever. She had never been more afraid, yet never more certain. She wasn't just an omega anymore. She was his mate, his equal, and that was something no one could take away from her. Emily stood in the quiet of her room, her heart still racing from the events of the past hour. Zayn's words echoed in her mind, replaying over and over again. She had said yes. She had agreed to be his mate. It was unreal. She had been so sure of herself, so convinced that her place in this world was nothing but that of an outcast. But now, everything was different. She wasn't sure how to feel, or what to do with the overwhelming emotions swirling inside her. She was his mate. The Alpha King had chosen her, a simple omega, over all the other women. It didn't make sense. Yet, the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she wasn't the one who needed to make sense of it. It was Zayn's choice that mattered. His reasons. His heart. Emily felt a strange sense of relief. Perhaps she had always known that she didn't belong with anyone else but him. Perhaps, deep down, She had always known that fate would lead her here. The question was, what now? What did it mean to be the mate of an alpha king? What would it mean for her future, for her life? She had no answers, but she knew she could not turn back. She would face whatever came next with him, with Zane by her side. The knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. She straightened up, her heart skipping a beat. "Come in," she called, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. The door opened, and there stood Zane, his expression unreadable. He looked as powerful and intimidating as ever, but there was something softer in his eyes, something that made Emily's chest tighten. "You're still awake," he said, his voice low and warm. "I thought I might find you here." "I couldn't sleep," Emily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Too many thoughts running through my head." Zane stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. "I understand," he said, walking towards her. "There's a lot to process. I won't rush you." Emily nodded, her eyes not leaving his. "I didn't expect this," she admitted. "I didn't think I would be chosen. I thought I was invisible." Zane's eyes softened, and he reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You were never invisible. To me," he said, his voice sincere. "I see you, Emily. You're stronger than you realize." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. It was the first time anyone had said something like that to her. She had always been told she was weak, broken, but Zane, he saw something different. "You're not broken," Zane continued, his voice gentle but firm. "You're everything I never knew I needed. And I will spend every day showing you how much you mean to me." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak to her like this before. She had always believed that no one could love her, that she wasn't worthy. But now, with Zane standing before her, offering her something she never thought she could have, she felt a spark of hope. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. Zane took a step back, his hand still resting on her shoulder. "Get some rest," he said softly. "We have a long road ahead of us, and I'll be by your side every step of the way." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with emotions she couldn't quite put into words. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Zane smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. It was a smile that made her feel like she mattered, like she was more than just an Omega. It made her feel like she was important. "You're welcome," he said, his voice soft but full of meaning. With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts. But this time, she didn't feel so alone. She felt something shift inside her, something that told her that maybe, just maybe, she had found her place in this world after all, a place by Zane's side. And for the first time in her life, Emily was ready to embrace whatever came next. Emily awoke the next morning to the soft light filtering through the curtains, casting a gentle glow on the room. The events of yesterday felt like a dream, too surreal to be real. Zane had chosen her. The Alpha King had looked at her, Emily Walker, a simple Omega, and had seen something worth his attention. She could still feel the warmth of his words lingering in the air. "I will spend every day showing you how much you mean to me." It was a promise, one that she was slowly allowing herself to believe in. Yet, there was a part of her that hesitated, a part that couldn't fully grasp the reality of it all. She had always been taught to stay hidden in the shadows, to remain unnoticed. How could she, someone so invisible for so long, possibly fit into this world of power and grandeur? She rose from the bed, her feet touching the cool wooden floor. The house was quiet, the only sounds being the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath her weight. She walked to the window, pulling the curtains aside to look outside. The view was breathtaking: rolling hills, lush forests, and the distant silhouette of the Blackwood Citadel. This was where she was supposed to belong now. The thought made her chest tighten. Was she truly ready for this life? Was she ready to be the Alpha King's mate? Zane had offered her a life of stability, a place by his side, but it wasn't just about the title or the power. It was the way he made her feel, the way his presence brought a sense of peace she had never known. But with that peace came uncertainty. The weight of what it meant to be his mate, to stand beside him in a world where power and politics reigned, was enough to make her heart race. She turned away from the window, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She had to be strong, not just for herself, but for Zane, too. He had trusted her with his heart, and now she had to trust him with hers. As she dressed, Her mind wandered to the conversation they had the night before. Zane had promised not to rush her, to give her time to process everything. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was expected of her. Was she supposed to be a queen? A leader? She wasn't sure she was ready for that. The thought of standing before the other alphas, representing Zane, terrified her. Could she do it? Could she be what he needed? The sound of footsteps approaching her door brought her out of her thoughts. The door opened gently, and there stood Zane, his presence as commanding as ever. But this time, his expression was softer, almost tender. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying the warmth she had come to rely on. "Are you ready?" Emily nodded, though her heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what he meant by ready, but she couldn't help the flutter of anticipation in her chest. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice steady. Zane smiled, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. "Then let's go? It's time to face what comes next." Emily took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to face it alone. She had Zane, and together, they would navigate whatever challenges awaited them. They left the room side by side, stepping into the unknown with nothing but their trust in each other to guide them. As they walked through the halls of the house, Emily couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would she be the mate the Alpha King needed? Would she be able to stand by his side and help lead this kingdom? For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. Because no matter what, she had found a place for herself, not just as Zane's mate, but as Emily Walker, someone worthy of love, of trust, and of belonging. Emily followed Zane through the corridors of the Blackwood Citadel, her heart pounding with every step. The air around them felt heavier today, charged with the anticipation of what was to come. She had known this day would come, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. As they walked, Zane's presence was a constant reassurance beside her, but Emily couldn't help the nagging doubts that lingered in her mind. Could she truly live up to the expectations placed upon her? Could she be the mate Zane needed, the queen he deserved? The further they walked, the more the weight of her thoughts pressed down on her. The grandeur of the citadel, with its towering stone walls and intricate carvings, felt both majestic and intimidating. She had never imagined her life would lead her here, to this place of power, of history, of politics. She was just an Omega, someone who had once been cast aside, ignored, and now she was about to step into a world that felt so far beyond her. Zane seemed to sense her unease, as he gently brushed his hand against hers, a silent gesture of comfort. His fingers were warm, grounding her, and she glanced up at him, finding a soft smile waiting for her. "You're doing just fine," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "You don't have to be perfect. Just be yourself." His words, simple yet profound, settled something inside her. She didn't have to be someone else. She didn't have to play a role or wear a mask. She could be Emily, the woman Zane had chosen, the woman who was worthy of being by his side. As they entered a large hall, the tension in Emily's chest began to loosen. This room was where the council met, where the decisions of the kingdom were made. But today, the focus wasn't on politics or alliances. Today, all eyes would be on her. "This is where we begin," Zane said, stopping just inside the threshold. "The council will want to meet you, to understand who you are, what you stand for." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew she would have to face them. She wasn't just Zane's mate now. She was part of this world, part of his world. And with that came responsibilities. Zane turned to her, his expression serious yet reassuring. "You don't need to prove anything," he said, his gaze steady. "Just be who you are. That's all I need." His words, though comforting, only added to her internal turmoil. She had spent her whole life hiding, avoiding attention, and now she was being thrust into the spotlight, in front of those who held power in the kingdom. How could she stand before them and not falter? But then she remembered Zane's earlier words, "Just be yourself." It was simple, and yet it felt like the hardest thing she had ever been asked to do. The doors to the council room swung open, and a wave of anticipation swept over her. She stepped forward, her heart in her throat. Zane's hand remained firmly at her back, a steadying force, as they walked toward the long table at the center of the room. The council members, a mix of powerful alphas and betas, turned their gazes toward her, their expressions unreadable. It was as though the very air, had thickened with their scrutiny. Emily felt the weight of their eyes, each one probing, evaluating. But she held her head high, just as Zane had told her to. She wasn't going to shrink back. She was more than just an Omega. She was Emily Walker, the woman Zane had chosen. The murmurs in the room died down, and the head of the council, an older alpha with a sharp gaze, spoke. "You are the one the Alpha King has chosen." His voice was deep, authoritative. Emily felt Zane's hand on her shoulder, a silent reassurance that made her stand a little taller. "I am," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. The room was silent for a long moment. Then, the Alpha spoke again. "And what makes you worthy of his side? What can you offer us? Offer this kingdom, that others cannot." Emily swallowed, her mind racing. She wasn't used to speaking in front of so many, especially not in a room full of powerful wolves who held the fate of the kingdom in their hands. But she wasn't going to let fear control her. "I may not be like the other women who have been chosen," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But I am here because Zane sees something in me. I offer my loyalty, my strength, and my belief in him. I will stand by his side, not because of his title, but because of who he is." The room was still. Emily held her breath, unsure of what to expect next. But slowly, the council members began to nod, some of them exchanging glances. It was subtle, but it was enough. Zane, standing beside her, gave her a small, proud smile. She had done it. She had spoken her truth. And in that moment, Emily knew she wasn't just Zane's mate. She was a partner in this world, in this kingdom, with a future she was ready to face, no matter what came next. The council meeting was over, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was just beginning. As she and Zane walked out of the grand hall, the weight of the moment pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had stood before the council, spoken her truth, and for the first time in her life, felt like she truly belonged. Yet there was still so much uncertainty. The kingdom, the politics, the expectations, it was all so much. Zane noticed the quiet in her demeanor, the way she seemed to be lost in her thoughts, and he placed a reassuring hand on her back as they walked down the corridor. "You did well in there," he said softly, his voice comforting. "You didn't back down." Emily gave him a small smile, though the unease still lingered inside her. "I was just being honest," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it feels like I'm walking into something I'm not ready for. I'm not sure I even know what to expect." Zane stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes soft, but filled with determination. "You don't have to be ready for everything," he said. "No one ever is. But I'm here. I'll be here every step of the way, guiding you. You don't have to do this alone." His words were simple, but they brought her a sense of comfort that she hadn't known she needed. Emily had always been alone, had always figured things out on her own, but with Zane, it felt different. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to do everything by herself. They continued walking, and as they made their way to the courtyard, Emily couldn't help but look around at the towering stone walls of the citadel, the vastness of it all. It was beautiful, majestic even, but it was also overwhelming. How could she fit in here, in this world so different from the life she had known? Zane seemed to sense her doubts. "You'll find your place," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "It might take time, but you will." They reached the center of the courtyard, where the sound of the wind rustling through the trees created a sense of peace in the otherwise tense atmosphere. Zane turned to her, his expression softening. "I know this is all a lot to take in, but we'll face it together. And in time, you'll see that you belong here just as much as anyone else." Emily met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words sink in. For the first time since she had arrived at the citadel, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could belong here. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was Zane's mate, and that meant something. It meant she had a place beside him, in this world, in this life. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow across the courtyard, Emily found herself standing taller. The fear that had gripped her heart earlier was still there, but it was now mingled with something else. Hope. Maybe she didn't have all the answers yet. Maybe the future was still uncertain, but with Zane by her side, she could face it. Together, they could navigate this world, this kingdom, and whatever challenges lay ahead. Zane stepped closer to her, his presence comforting, and gently cupped her face in his hands. "No matter what happens, remember this," he said softly, his voice steady and filled with conviction. You are not alone. You will never be alone. Emily nodded, her chest tightening with emotion. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to face it. With Zane by her side, she felt like she could conquer anything. She took a deep breath and allowed herself to believe in their future, in the love they had found, and in the strength they would build together. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She was Emily, and she was ready to embrace everything that came with this new chapter of her life. The days that followed the council meeting felt like a whirlwind to Emily. As she adjusted to her new life within the walls of the Blackwood Citadel, she found herself torn between the comfort of Zane's presence and the looming weight of the responsibilities she was now expected to shoulder. It wasn't just the grand halls, the endless corridors, or the constant gaze of those who recognized her as the Alpha King's mate. It was the weight of the kingdom itself, a burden she wasn't sure she was ready to carry. But every time doubt crept in, Zane was there, a steady force by her side. He never pushed her to become something she wasn't. He simply stood with her, offering quiet reassurance whenever she needed it. It was late one afternoon when Zane took her aside for a quiet conversation in the garden, a peaceful area of the citadel she had grown to love. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air, and the soft murmur of the nearby stream added to the tranquility. You're thinking about it again, Zane said, his voice calm but knowing. Emily looked up at him, startled. She hadn't realized she was so obvious. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Zane. I know you said I don't have to be perfect, but what if I can't do this? What if I fail? Zane's gaze softened, and he reached out to gently take her hand. Emily, listen to me. You don't have to have all the answers right now. No one does. I didn't when I took this crown, and I still don't. But what I do know is that you are not alone. I'm here, and I'll be here every step of the way. Emily let out a shaky breath, feeling the tension in her chest ease slightly. His words were a balm to her insecurities. It was easy to forget, in the face of all the expectations, that she wasn't alone in this. She had Zane, and with him, maybe she could do more than just survive. But you're the king, Emily said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. You don't need me to help you. You have all the power and authority. Zane smiled softly, his eyes never leaving hers. Yes, I have power, but that doesn't mean I can do it all on my own. I need you, Emily. You are the one who can balance me. Together, we are stronger. I believe in you. More than you know. Emily felt a swell of emotion at his words. How had she ended up here, with him? With the Alpha King, the man she had once thought of as unattainable, now offering her a partnership, not just in name, but in everything? She squeezed his hand, a small smile tugging at her lips. I'm trying, she whispered. I just don't want to let you down. Zane leaned closer, his face serious but kind. You won't. You never could. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of peace that she hadn't realized she was missing until now. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in what Zane was saying. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to have everything figured out. As long as they were together, she could face whatever came next. The sound of footsteps interrupted their moment, and Emily looked up to see a messenger approaching, carrying a sealed letter. The messenger handed it to Zane, who broke the seal and read the contents. His expression shifted slightly, a mixture of concern and thoughtfulness crossing his features. Emily's heart skipped a beat. What is it? She asked. Zane glanced up at her, his gaze filled with a quiet intensity. A new challenge is approaching, he said slowly. The neighboring packs are making demands, and they want to test our strength. It looks like we may need to prepare for another trial. Emily's stomach tightened at the mention of the upcoming trial. The weight of the kingdom, of the role she was expected to play, suddenly felt heavier again. But Zane's hand found hers once more, grounding her. Whatever comes, we'll face it together, he said, his voice steady. Emily nodded, a sense of determination beginning to rise within her. The road ahead would not be easy, and the challenges would come, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't facing them alone. With Zane by her side, she would find the strength to meet whatever lay ahead. Together, they would navigate this kingdom, protect their people, and face the future that was unfolding before them. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Emily could feel the weight of what was coming, though she didn't fully understand what it would entail. The tension in the citadel was palpable, and every glance from the guards, Every whisper in the hall seemed to carry the weight of what was to come. Zane had informed her of the demands from the neighboring packs, their request for a trial to test the strength of their leadership. Emily wasn't entirely sure what kind of trial they would face, but she knew that it wasn't going to be easy. The Alpha King had ruled with a firm hand, but with other alphas challenging his authority, it felt like the calm before a storm. As the day of the trial drew closer, Zane spent more time in meetings, strategizing with his advisors. Emily felt the distance growing between them, though it wasn't intentional. Zane was doing what needed to be done for the kingdom, and she understood that, but it didn't stop the quiet ache in her chest. She missed the days when it was just the two of them, when the weight of the world didn't press down so heavily on them. But Zane had responsibilities, and so did she. The morning of the trial arrived quickly, and Emily stood at the window of their chambers, looking out over the courtyard. The air was crisp, and a light fog hung in the trees. The citadel looked peaceful from up here, as though nothing could ever disturb it. But Emily knew better. There was always something lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to emerge. Zane entered the room, his presence as commanding as ever. His eyes softened when he saw her standing by the window, and he walked over to her. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice calm, though Emily could sense the tension beneath it. She turned to face him, her heart beating a little faster. "I'm as ready as I'll ever be," she replied, though she didn't feel it. She didn't know what to expect from the trial. She didn't know what her role would be in all of this. But she did know that she wasn't going to stand idly by. She would stand with Zane, no matter what. Zane reached out, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "Whatever happens today, know this," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. "You don't have to face it alone. We face this together, always." Emily nodded, her throat tightening with emotion. It wasn't just the trial that weighed on her. It was everything. The future, the kingdom, the life they were building together. But in this moment, with Zane by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope. They could do this. Together. They left their chambers and made their way to the central courtyard, where the trial would take place. The courtyard was filled with representatives from the various packs, each one wearing the colors of their people. The air was thick with the tension of 100 eyes watching, waiting for what was to come. Emily could feel their gazes on her, on Zane, and the weight of it was almost suffocating. But Zane's hand was steady on her back, and she focused on that steadiness, on the calm that he offered. As they stepped forward, the crowd fell silent. The trial would begin. Emily didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but she knew one thing for sure. She was ready to face whatever it was. Zane had always been there for her, and now it was her turn to stand by him. This wasn't just a trial for the kingdom. It was a trial for them, for their bond, for everything they had built together. And Emily was determined to face it head-on, with Zane at her side. As they approached the center of the courtyard, the first challenge was announced. The trial would test Zane's strength and leadership, but it would also test the unity of their bond. Emily would have to prove that she, too, was worthy of standing by Zane's side. It wasn't a fight she had been prepared for, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to back down. She would prove that she was just as strong, just as capable as anyone else. She was Zane's mate, and she was ready to show everyone that she belonged right here, beside him. The trial was unlike anything Emily had ever imagined. The air was thick with anticipation as the representatives from each pack watched intently, their eyes scrutinizing every move Zane and Emily made. She stood beside him, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. Zane's hand rested gently on the small of her back, offering the steady reassurance she needed. This was their moment, to prove their strength, to prove that they were a force to be reckoned with, not just as rulers, but as partners. The first challenge was simple, yet symbolic. Zane was to face a series of tasks designed to test his leadership, his power, and his ability to unite the kingdom. But Emily soon realized that this trial was as much for her as it was for him. They were being tested not just as rulers, but as a team, as a couple. The challenge began with a series of riddles and puzzles that tested not just their intellect, but their ability to work together. Zane, always the strategist, solved each puzzle with ease, but Emily's input was just as crucial. She had underestimated her own ability to contribute, but now, standing beside Zane, she realized how much she could offer. They complemented each other perfectly. As the day wore on, the challenges grew more intense. each one testing their resolve, their strength, and their bond. But with each new task, Emily felt herself growing stronger, more confident in her place by Zane's side. She wasn't just an Omega, she was a partner, a queen in her own right. The final test was the most daunting. Zane and Emily were placed in the center of the arena, surrounded by their closest allies and the watching council. A series of physical challenges awaited them, testing their endurance and teamwork. Zane moved with the grace of an alpha, his every step sure and calculated, but Emily wasn't far behind. She had spent years feeling weak, insignificant, but here, now, with Zane by her side, she realized how strong she truly was. They worked together, anticipating each other's moves, their connection so deep that it felt like they could read each other's minds. When the final task was completed, the crowd erupted into applause. Emily could hardly believe what they had just accomplished. They had faced the trial together, and they had passed, not as individuals, but as a team. As the applause died down, Zane turned to Emily, his eyes filled with pride. "We did it," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder. Emily smiled up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "We did," she agreed, her voice steady despite the overwhelming feelings inside her. They had done it. They had faced the trial, passed the test, and proved that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. It wasn't just the trial they had conquered. It was their future, their place in this kingdom. And together, they would face whatever challenges came next, knowing that they could overcome anything, as long as they stood side by side.